5 months ago, I was sitting in the kitchen with my 20-year-old daughter, Amanda, and my 18-year-old son, Brian, discussing my husband, Henry. Amanda, with frustration in her voice, said, "Mom, why do you always complain about Dad? You sound like a spoiled teenager. He gives you everything, but it's never enough. What more do you want?" Feeling defensive, I replied, "I want some excitement. He's too easygoing and never stands up for himself. I need him to be more assertive and show some anger once in a while." Brian, looking uncomfortable, interrupted, "Really, Mom? Dad-'s gotten angry with me before, and it wasn't pleasant. I wouldn't want to experience that again." He shuddered at the memory. I then shared my plan with them. "I'll push him until he finally loses his patience and gets angry with me. Once he cools down, I'll make it up to him and show him I care, but I need your help." Amanda looked skeptical. "I don't like that idea. If you love Dad, you shouldn't put him through that." "What do you need from us?" Brian objected strongly. "No way, Mom. I pushed Dad too far once, and it took a long time to rebuild his trust. It wouldn't work. Dad doesn't give warnings, he just snaps. Please don't do this." Ignoring his concerns, I continued explaining my plan. Then I asked Amanda, "What do you think? I wanted to push him too far, but I need him to stand up to me." Amanda reluctantly agreed. "I don't like it. Like Brian, I'm afraid it will drive us apart. I'll help to a point, but if things go as Brian predicted, I'll support Dad instead." I turned to Brian. "And you?" "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "If I see Dad suffering, I'll tell him everything." The next morning, I started by shouting, "Henry, where's my coffee? I told you I wanted coffee." Henry, startled, came out of the kitchen with a cup in hand. "What took you so long?" I snapped. "Freshly made coffee takes time," Henry replied, trailing off. My complaints continued throughout our vacation. Brian tried to talk to his father, but Henry calmly said it was between him and me, and he'd sort it out. As we drove south on the highway, the tension was thick. My behavior had nearly pushed Henry to his breaking point. He focused on driving, planning to confront me at our destination. I sensed he was close to snapping and stayed quiet. After a 3-hour drive, we set up camp in silence, ate lunch without speaking, and Henry went for a walk to cool off. When he returned 3 hours later looking refreshed, he found me drinking with some other campers. "Darling, shall we go to dinner?" he asked. "Can't you see I'm having fun?" "Back off," I replied, laughing with the group. Henry turned pale, noticing my hand on another man's thigh. He muttered, "As you wish," and walked away. Determined, Henry withdrew as much money as he could, opened a new bank account, and called his boss, explaining the situation and arranging for his pay to go to the new account. His boss, understanding the circumstances, granted him an extended vacation. At 1 a.m., I stumbled back to our camp, clearly intoxicated and reeking of alcohol. "Henry, come here, I want you," I mumbled. Henry, through clenched teeth, replied, "No way, who knows what has been in there tonight? Forget it." Oblivious to his anger, I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, and passed out. The next morning, I woke up feeling nauseous, with a pounding headache. I called out for Henry, but got no response. Crawling outside, I found him enjoying breakfast in the sunlight. He smirked and said, "Not feeling well, are you?" I tried to speak, but he cut me off. "Shut up and listen. Here are the car papers, the key, and the RV papers." "Why?" I muttered, barely holding myself together. Henry, nearly shouting, said, "Shut your mouth while I am talking. The bank cards and credit cards are yours. I am leaving." Panicked, I asked, "When are you coming back? We need to talk." Henry replied coldly, "The question is, am I coming back? And the answer is no. This is goodbye." He picked up his backpack, and I cried out, "No, this wasn't supposed to happen." I felt nauseous again. Henry showed no compassion and waited. Finally, I whispered, "I love you. I just wanted you to be more assertive." He looked at me with disbelief. "Well, you got what you wanted. I am furious. Check the sheets when I'm gone. They were stained like when we got married. You smelled like a bar last night. I wanted to talk about our marriage, but your behavior made my decision easy. Get tested for STDs." His last words hit me hard. "Goodbye," he said, and left. Overwhelmed, I wept and passed out on the bed. Henry walked to the nearby town, thinking that leaving was easier than he expected. By evening, he found a boarding house in the town of Hillsborough. Alone in his room, he realized his marriage was truly over. He could handle my complaints, but not my betrayal. Meanwhile, I woke up again, feeling slightly better, but still nauseous. I stepped in dried vomit and, breathing through my mouth, gathered my toiletries for a shower as the hot water ran. She tried to recall the events of the previous night, but her memories were fuzzy. One thing was certain: her marriage was on the brink of collapse. Henry had always been forgiving, but the recent events, including her affair, were too much for him. She sobbed in the shower, overwhelmed by her mistakes. Meanwhile, Henry sat in his temporary room, reflecting on his situation. He needed to end the marriage and find a new place to live. He called his boss, who assured him they'd find suitable accommodations. In the meantime, he began searching for an apartment. Ingrid, still feeling unclean despite her shower, returned to the RV, which reeked of stale odors. She started cleaning, avoiding any contact with her children. After some effort, she sat outside, struggling with the urge to have coffee and cookies as the memories of the previous day overwhelmed her. Her phone rang, and it was Amanda. "Mom, why haven't you been answering your phone? I can reach Dad. What is going on?" "We had a fight," Ingrid admitted. "He is really upset this time. I don't know where he is. He threw my car keys, papers, and bank cards at me and stormed off with his backpack." Amanda's tone was stern. "What did you do?" "You know how Dad gets when he's pushed too far. Mom, you're in serious trouble." "I know," Ingrid replied, her voice cracking. "I don't think he'll ever come back. Things happen that he can forgive. I'm just hoping for a peaceful divorce." "Divorce? What on earth did you do to make things irreparable?" Amanda asked, shocked. Ingrid composed herself and explained everything, including Henry's cold departure and her own harsh words. Amanda gasped, "Mom, you pushed him too far just to get a reaction. I'll try to reach Dad and talk to him, but I'm not getting involved. You brought this on yourself. You need to tell Brian, he'll be furious. I am not your go-between. You've got 2 weeks to sort this out and come home. I'm not coming to help. Bye." Amanda hung up and immediately tried calling her father. The line was busy. She sighed, relieved that he hadn't just disappeared. After 10 minutes, she tried again. "Hello, Annie. How are you?" Henry's voice was strained and tired. "Dad, you left Mom. What's going to happen to us? Are we still a family?" Amanda asked, her voice trembling. Henry sighed. "Yes, I left her. Did she tell you everything?" "Probably not," Amanda replied. "Mom basically abandoned you months ago. Yesterday, she humiliated you in front of her friends. I understand why you left. My employer found me an apartment and a good lawyer. I'm going to rent a truck and move out. I'll give you my new address soon." Amanda felt a chill at the anger in her father's voice. "I understand, Dad. One last question. Who will explain things to Brian?" Henry paused. "When you talk to him, just say we split up. Don't give him the details, it'll crush him. I told your mom she needs to explain it to both of you." They hung up, and Amanda quietly cried, feeling the weight of the situation. Meanwhile, Henry was determined to follow through. He could handle difficult situations, but cheating was a deal-breaker. He remembered a past relationship where he was cheated on and vowed never to tolerate it again. Packing his belongings, he headed for the bus station. The next day, Henry returned to their home, which now felt empty and meaningless. He had a meeting with CEO Gerard Dirksen and his lawyer scheduled in an hour. After a sleepless night packing essentials and family heirlooms, he felt ready. Assuming Ingrid wouldn't be home that morning, he went to his office. Upon arrival, he was directed to the CEO's office, where his boss greeted him. "Harry, take a seat. Coffee's on the way." "Did you get any sleep?" Gerard asked, concerned. Harry shook his head. Gerard continued. "Harry, meet Miss Ella Hervé. She'll be handling your divorce case. You still want to proceed, right?" Trembling slightly, Harry replied, "Yes, as quickly as possible, but I need some rest first." Gerard nodded understandingly. "I just wanted you to meet her. You can contact her later." They exchanged numbers, and Ella left. Gerard then said, "Let's drop the formalities. Call me Gerard. I've been through this myself and want to help. We have 2 options for housing, one in the city and one in the suburbs, both close to public transportation." Harry chose the suburban house. Gerard sighed in relief. "Good choice. Here's the key and the address." The rent is $750 a month deducted from your paycheck. Harold and a truck are ready to help you move. Thanks, Gerard, Harry said, grateful for the support. You are welcome, but don to return to work until you've talked to Miss Hervé and sorted things out. If you need anything, just ask, Gerard added. Harry left and met Harold. They drove to the new apartment, a third-floor unit in a 5-story building without an elevator. It had a living room, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a half-bath, and a large balcony overlooking a park. It was sparsely furnished, just the essentials. Harry said, I don't need much from the old house. Let's go. 2 hours later, the truck left Henry's old home. He had taken only the essentials, including bedding and personal items. He left a note for Ingrid, saying she would hear from his lawyer soon. Ingrid was livid, left stranded at the campsite with the car and RV. She searched for a bus stop, realizing she was stuck without a driver's license. She missed the last bus and had to wait until morning. Unable to find her drinking companions, the camp director informed her they had left. Amanda and Brian weren't answering her calls. She returned to the RV in despair. The next morning, Ingrid walked to catch the 7 a.m. bus, but the campground manager stopped her. It was a bus for locals only, so she had to wait for the next one an hour later. She thanked the manager and continued walking. When Ingrid finally reached their street, she held on to a flicker of hope that Henry might have forgiven her. Entering the house, she called out Henry, but was met with silence. The antique clock was missing, and all of Henry's personal belongings were gone. She sank into a chair, realizing he had left for good. She had hoped for a confrontation and reconciliation, but found only emptiness instead. Henry had often told Amanda and Brian, "What is worse, someone being mad at you or acting like you done it exist? If they are mad, they still care, but if they ignore you, it is over." Ingrid knew this too well, remembering a time when Henry caught Brian buying suspicious items for a party. Instead of punishing him, Henry had said, "If you want to ruin your life, that's your choice. I am done." Now she realized Henry was doing the same to her. Instead of anger, he was cutting her out, and she knew it was her fault. Ingrid walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and quickly closed it, remembering that alcohol had played a big part in their troubles. She spotted an envelope from Henry and tore it open. The note read, "Ingrid, I've had enough humiliation. This marriage is over. I've hired a lawyer. You should do the same." Ingrid screamed in frustration. He didn't even sign it. She hurled a teapot and cup against the wall, shattering both. Almost a year later, Henry had settled into a routine sleep, work, eat, repeat. One day, he received divorce papers in the mail. The process had been grueling, with Ingrid trying every possible way to contact him, but Henry had ignored her completely. Financially, the split was straightforward since their incomes and savings were similar, and the house, now mortgage-free, was worth over $500,000. Henry's frugal lifestyle and long work hours had earned him substantial bonuses, leading him to consider new investment opportunities. Henry decided he wanted a house with a garden, space for his motorcycle, a library, a high-end stereo system, a large kitchen, and 3 bedrooms. He searched online and through work contacts for a real estate agent, eventually finding one he liked. He celebrated by booking a ticket to see Brahms' German Requiem, feeling it was an appropriate choice for the moment. After the concert, he went to a nearby pub, still immersed in the music. He was sipping a Dutch Genever when a voice called out, Henry Vander, is that you?" A tall woman approached him. "I'm sorry, miss, do I know you?" he asked politely. She laughed. "I am Eve Gardner. We went to school together. I had a crush on you back then but was too shy to talk to you." Harry tried to remember but couldn't he. He smiled and said, "I should remember a beautiful woman like you, but nothing comes to mind." "Can I buy you a drink to make up for it?" Eve replied. "I actually have a date, but can I get your number for another time?" Just then, a man appeared behind her, glaring. "Baby, this is our date. You're going to have a good time with a real man." Harry quickly wrote his number on a piece of paper and handed it to Eve. The man demanded, "Give me that. You are my girlfriend, and I don't want you sneaking around with another guy." Eve shot back, "You are drunk. I'm not your girlfriend. This was our first and last date. I am calling an Uber. You are in no condition to drive, and I'm not going anywhere with you." The man growled, "I'll show you," and raised his hand as if to slap Eve. Harry reacted swiftly, kneeing him hard in the solar plexus. The man gasped and staggered. Harry held him up, saying calmly, "Behave or I'll flatten you. Pay for the lady's drinks and leave quietly. I'll call her an Uber. Nod if we have a deal." The man nodded, paid the bill, and left without another word. Harry called an Uber for Eve, who watched in amazement. "That's what I remember from school," she said. "You always helped others, even though you were quiet. How did you handle that guy? He was much bigger than you." Harry replied, "I've been practicing Krav Maga since I was 7. It helps with anger management, building confidence, and self-control." The Uber arrived, and Harry paid the driver, bidding Eve good night. The next day, Henry received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, Harry Vander. How can I help you?" "Good afternoon, Harry. It's Eve. Do you have plans tomorrow?" "I am looking at houses with a real estate agent," Henry replied. Oh, Eve sounded disappointed. Henry quickly added, "I do appreciate your help. Women have a practical eye. Can you join me?" Eve eagerly agreed. "Yes, I'd love to." "Do you know what you're looking for?" Harry suggested. "Let us discuss it over dinner. Either I'll cook or you can choose a restaurant." Eve laughed. "Can you cook?" "When I cook, there are no complaints or leftovers," Henry boasted. "Really? I thought you ate out every day," Eve teased. "I've been a bit of a recluse lately." "Last night was my first night out in a year," Harry admitted. "Oh dear, why?" Eve asked, her voice softening. Henry hesitated. "It's a long story. I got my final divorce notice that night. I needed to mark the occasion with something significant." Eve paused, then said, "That's too bad. I'll take a chance on your cooking. When should I come over?" Harry gave her his address, and she agreed to arrive at 6. At 6:05, Eve stood nervously at Harry's door and rang the bell. Harry opened it promptly, smiling warmly. "Wow, you look beautiful," he said sincerely. Eve, wearing a flattering dress and light makeup, blushed. "Thank you. May I come in?" "Of course. The lasagna will be ready in half an hour. We have melon and Parma ham for an appetizer." "What would you like to drink?" Henry asked, his eyes twinkling. Eve enjoyed the evening, although she ended up drinking more wine than she'd planned. After dessert, she felt lightheaded. Noticing her state, Henry gently suggested, "I think it's best if I take you home. You've had a bit too much to drink." Feeling more relaxed, Eve replied, "Henry, I'd rather stay here with you." Realizing what she'd said, she blushed deeply. Henry smiled warmly. "I'd love that, Eve, but I have a rule: I don't spend the night with women who've had too much to drink. Let's see how things go tomorrow." Half an hour later, they arrived at Eve's house. She looked down, embarrassed, and whispered, "I know you don't find me attractive enough, but could I at least have a kiss goodnight?" Stunned, Henry gently lifted her chin and said, "Eve, you are beautiful. I'd love to be closer, but not when you're tipsy. I don't want you to regret it later. I care about you and want this to be special. Is that clear?" Eve nodded, touched by his sincerity. "You're the first man who's ever been patient with me. I like you, and I'll wait. See you tomorrow? I'll make breakfast, okay?" The next morning, Henry nervously knocked on Eve's door. When she opened it, he smiled and said, "You look stunning. How am I supposed to focus on house hunting today?" Eve giggled and hugged him. "I've fallen for you too. This feels like the start of something wonderful." After breakfast, Eve changed into more casual attire, and they met the real estate agent. The agent showed them 4 properties, 1 in the city, 2 in the suburbs, and 1 in a nearby village. Henry quickly dismissed the city house, wanting a place with a garden. As they toured, he noticed the agent giving Eve too much attention and realized the house near the airport was overpriced. Henry confronted the agent. "Are you trying to overcharge me and flirt with my date?" The agent, caught off guard, stammered, "What do you mean?" Henry replied, "You're trying to add an extra 100,000 and are unprofessional with my friend here. We are done." He turned to Eve. "Let's go." Eve, surprised by Henry's assertiveness, asked, "Why did you react like that?" Henry explained, "The agent wasn't respecting you and tried to overcharge me. I don't trust him. We'll pick up the keys for the last house ourselves from the agency." At the agency, they got the keys to the final house. Eve asked, Am I officially your girlfriend now? Henry smiled and said, Not officially, but I was a bit jealous earlier. I'd like you to be my girlfriend. So, Eve, what do you think? Eve, touched but cautious, replied, You were serious, right? I'm recovering from a rough relationship and can go through that again. Henry nodded. I'm serious about us. Eve smiled. I've always liked you, even back in school. You've proved to be the man I hoped you'd be. Yes, I'd love to be your girlfriend. The house in Formont seemed ideal but had some structural issues. Henry called in a specialist to check its condition and a contractor to estimate the costs for a new roof and other repairs. Despite the necessary work, the house was within Henry's budget. Frustrated with the first real estate agent, Henry offered $50,000 below the asking price. Now we wait, he told Eve. It's getting late. How about dinner? 3 weeks later, after tough negotiations, Henry purchased the house. Both he and the seller were satisfied, but the real estate agency wasn't happy with the reduced commission. Henry's company then offered him a better 3-year contract, prompting a celebration. At dinner, Eve asked, You were involved in stocks, right? Yes. Why? Henry responded, curious. When I divorced, my ex-husband tried to hide his assets, but his twin exposed him. He still wants those stocks. I need to protect them, Eve explained. Henry promised to help the next morning. Later, he asked if she was ready to meet Amanda and Brian. Excited, she agreed to a dinner introduction. 2 weeks later, they dined at a Turkish restaurant. Amanda and Brian quickly warmed to Eve, but then Ingrid unexpectedly showed up. What is she doing here? How did she know we were here? Henry asked, confused. Amanda suggested, maybe she followed us. Eve excused herself to the restroom while Henry explained to his kids that Eve was his first serious relationship since the divorce. When Eve returned, she was visibly upset. How could you treat her like that? She exclaimed, storming out. Ingrid smirked, saying she needed to talk to Henry. He refused, angrily following Eve. Amanda then told Ingrid, You are dead to us, and Brian agreed. They left the restaurant, and the owner asked Ingrid to leave, threatening to call security if she refused. Furious, Ingrid found herself outside, angry at Henry for walking away once again. She decided not to chase after him that night. The next morning, Henry tried to reach Eve, but she wouldn't respond. Even a heartfelt letter came back unopened. Devastated, Henry withdrew into a routine of work, sleep, and minimal social interactions, keeping contact only with his children and close colleagues. 2 weeks after the incident at the restaurant, Henry was called to CEO Gerard Dirksen's office, where lawyer Ella Hervé was waiting. Gerard's usual friendly demeanor was absent as he asked Henry about the no fraternization clause in his contract. Henry, startled by the accusation, confirmed his awareness of the no fraternization policy. The lawyer then accused him of inappropriate communication with Eve Gardner, now a client. Henry explained that he and Eve knew each other before she became a client. Miss Hervé, however, declared that this relationship violated company policy, warranting immediate dismissal, and demanded his work laptop and phone. Henry, maintaining his composure, asserted that the devices were personal property and hinted at legal action if they terminated him unjustly. Dirksen, taken aback by Henry's calm defiance, insisted on confiscating the devices, citing the protection of sensitive company information. Henry countered, emphasizing that he was responsible for the information as the account manager and had never breached confidentiality. The lawyer then announced Henry's immediate termination and demanded he hand over a list of his accounts. Henry retorted, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon." Months later, Henry triumphed in court, proving his wrongful termination. The company was ordered to pay him the full contract amount, bonuses, and damages. Many clients chose to follow Henry, transferring their business to him, impressed by his integrity. The judge dismissed the company's claims of account theft. As he left the courthouse, Henry called Amanda and Brian, inviting them to celebrate his victory. Returning to his new expansive home, a place now complete with a library, a spacious kitchen, a garage, guest rooms, a gym, and a pool, Henry reflected on his life. Despite his robust exterior, he struggled with a deep sense of isolation. He had purchased a vintage BMW motorcycle, intending to restore it, but found himself lacking the motivation. Outwardly, he maintained a professional demeanor for his clients and children, but internally, he had lost faith in relationships and was wary of getting hurt again. Amanda and Brian arranged to meet at a well-known restaurant, coincidentally the same one where Eve had abruptly left Henry. They were increasingly concerned about their father's depression and discussed various ways to support him, though he had rejected counseling and any attempts to set him up on dates. As they conversed, they noticed Eve entering with another man, followed by Ingrid approaching their table. Amanda, her expression hardening, asked, "What do you want?" Ingrid, trying to appear composed, replied, "I want to talk to both of you. This situation has gone on long enough. I am still your mother." Brian stood, facing her squarely. "After what you did to Dad, you are not our mother anymore. You nearly broke him, and we can forgive that. You're not welcome here, and we suspect you were involved in getting him fired. You need to leave." Ignoring her mother, Amanda called Henry. "Dad, we're coming over. Is there anything you want us to bring?" Henry, puzzled, asked, "Why the sudden visit?" "Oh, let's just say we need to get out of here," she replied cryptically. As they were leaving, a man approached them outside. "Hello, I am Jake Gardner, Eve's brother. I think my sister was misled about your father. Can we talk privately?" Amanda, taken aback, handed him her business card. "Please get in touch soon. Our father is really struggling, and we can seem to help him. Our mother isn't helping either." Jake nodded in acknowledgement and returned to Eve. She asked, "What are you doing?" "Henry doesn't want anything to do with me." Jake responded, "You can be sure about that. You've been miserable since that night, and I think you still have feelings for him. This might be your last chance to clear things up. I'll make the call." He looked at Amanda's card, realizing he hadn't caught her last name. Amanda. "Tomorrow morning, let us sort this out." The next morning, at 8:30, Amanda's phone rang. Amanda Vander, speaking. "Good morning, Amanda. This is Jake Gardner. We met yesterday." "Good morning, Jake. You're not calling too early. My father is in a bad place emotionally. You mentioned Eve still cares about him?" "Yes. When we meet, she'll explain everything. She's been really down since that day. I've set up a meeting at the restaurant, hoping we can all talk. Can you come to my place around 5? We need to discuss everything. I'll ask my brother to join us. You must really care about your sister to go through all this trouble." "I do. She always looked out for me. And now it's my turn to help her. I'll see you at 5. If your brother can make it on time, he can join us whenever he can. I'll send the address and prepare something to eat." "Great. We'll bring drinks, wine, beer, or both?" "Both, please. I prefer beer. Eve likes wine." "Consider it done. See you at 5. A little after 5:00, 5 people gathered around Jake's kitchen table, including Jake's wife, Lisa. She poured wine while Jake served roasted chicken with vegetables and freshly baked bread. Amanda broke the silence. "Shall we talk while we eat or wait?" Jake suggested, "We better start now." Amanda turned to Eve. "Can you tell me what my mom told you about my dad?" Eve blushed and hesitated before speaking. "I'll try. She described my ex-husband's abusive behavior in great detail, which really shook me. She asked if Henry had told me why they divorced. When I said no, she claimed he had verbally and emotionally abused her for months and had cheated on her. I believed her and ran." Amanda and Brian shook their heads, deeply troubled. Brian said, "That story has some truth to it, except for one big lie. It wasn't our father who did those things, it was our mother. She manipulated the situation and even orchestrated his firing by accusing him falsely. They used a photo of you and our dad from that day to back up her lies." Eve turned pale, her voice trembling. "Is Henry really who he seems to be? I left a good man because I believed your mother's lies." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she began to sob. Amanda reached out to comfort her, whispering, "Maybe there is still a way to make things right between you two," Amanda suggested, her voice hopeful. Eve looked uncertain. "What should we do?" Lisa, observing the conversation, chimed in, "Your mother will always try to cause trouble. You need to deal with her first. I have an idea, but you might not like it." Brian leaned forward, intrigued. "Tell us. We'll consider almost anything." Lisa took a deep breath. You have to let your mother back into your lives, but with conditions. She must leave your father alone and see a psychiatrist to deal with her issues. Amanda and Brian exchanged glances, then nodded. We can do that, Amanda said. But what about our father? Meanwhile, Henry was swimming laps to burn off his frustration. Despite being in great shape, his 2 failed relationships had left him wary of starting new ones. That day, a female client had even threatened to take her business elsewhere if he didn't date her, which he declined, recommending her to his former company instead. After a long swim, he headed inside just as the doorbell rang. Checking the camera, he saw Ingrid and, feeling his anger rise, opened the door. Ingrid, whatever you are here for, the answer is no. Leave, he said firmly, slamming the door and activating his security system, prepared to request a restraining order if necessary. Ingrid, who had dressed to impress after feeling confident with a clean bill of health following a bout with syphilis, was caught off guard by Henry S.'s rejection, especially noticing his fit physique. Just then, Henry S.'s phone rang. What? Oh, sorry, Amanda, I thought it was your mom. She was just at the door. What did she want? I didn't give her a chance to speak. I just told her to leave. Amanda sighed on the other end. Dad, are you okay? When will you come out of your shell? We miss you. Henry, sounding weary, replied, I don't know. After everything she put me through, my love for her is gone. But remember, she's still your mother. Don't do anything rash like cutting her off completely. I've tried calling her, but she doesn't respond. I blocked her number, but sometimes I still dream about her and wake up missing her. Dad, you need to move on. Can we come over tomorrow for dinner? Maybe we can help you out of this funk. Henry hesitated, but then agreed. Okay, 600. Use your keys, I'll be swimming, but I'll make time to cook. See you tomorrow. Love you. Love you too, Dad, Amanda said, feeling hopeful. She immediately called Eve. Eve, be at my place tomorrow at 3:30. We need to be at Dad's between 4:00 and 5:00. I told him it's just me and Brian coming for dinner, so start thinking about what to wear. Eve's excitement was evident. Thanks, Amanda. I already know what I'm going to wear. See you then. Meanwhile, Ingrid had been trying desperately to reach her children, sending letters and even showing up at their doors, but her number was blocked and her letters went unanswered. Desperate, she called Amanda again. Mom, why are you calling? You know we don't want to talk to you, Amanda answered coldly. I just needed to hear your voice. I miss you both so much. What do I have to do to see you again? Ingrid pleaded. Amanda took a deep breath. Dad doesn't need your interference. He's been doing fine without you, but Brian and I talked and decided on 2 conditions before we'll consider speaking with you. Are you listening? Yes, anything, Ingrid replied eagerly. First, you need to leave Dad alone. We know you scared off his girlfriend and were involved in his firing. He moved on and taken some clients with him, so leave him be. I promise, Ingrid said, though doubt crept into her voice. Second, you need to see a psychiatrist to work on your obsession with Dad. You'll never get him back, Mom. I don't know if I can do that. Ingrid trailed off. Amanda remained firm. I'll go with you, it's part of the deal, and Brian agrees. Let us know when your first appointment is and leave Dad alone. Ingrid, though unhappy with the terms, felt a glimmer of hope. The next day, Amanda and Eve arrived at Henry's house. Amanda whispered, You look amazing. Eve, nervous, replied, I'm so anxious I feel sick. Surprise him in the pool, he wanted to run away there, Amanda suggested with a grin. Taking a deep breath, Eve approached the pool and saw Henry swimming. She was struck by how fit he looked. Summoning her courage, she stepped into the water, and the current gently carried her toward him. Instinctively, Henry reached out to steady her as they drifted to the other side. He pressed the emergency stop button and the current ceased. Noticing Eve's anxious expression, he asked, Eve, what are you doing here? Please, Dante, send me away. Let me explain first, she pleaded. Henry, stunned, nodded. I'm not throwing you out, but you need to explain. How did you get here? Amanda called out from the gym door. Blame me, Dad. There's coffee and tea in the kitchen. As they sat at the kitchen table, Henry looked at Amanda, who explained, She jumped into the pool. Eve, you need to tell him everything. Eve added, He wouldn't look up, so I had to do something. But I want to do that again. Henry sighed, trying to gather his thoughts. Amanda, Brian, I'm not sure how I feel about this. You are meddling in things. Amanda interjected gently. Dad, we're not trying to meddle, but you seem so unhappy. We had to do something. And that S when we met Jake and Eve. Henry frowned. Jake? Eve quickly clarified. My younger brother. Henry, looking more confused, said, Okay, I need to understand everything. Just promise not to get upset and let me finish the story. Amanda and Brian nodded. We understand, Dad. We trust you, and that's why we think Eve should explain everything. Eve took a deep breath, looked at Amanda for reassurance, and began, When I met you, Henry, I was on my first date after a horrible marriage. My ex was abusive, starting with verbal abuse and escalating to physical violence. You saw me panic in the pool because he once tried to drown me. The local police were very conservative and wouldn't help unless there were visible injuries. I finally ended up in the hospital and he is now in jail. Then I met you, Henry, at that school event. You were independent, Eve began, her voice trembling slightly. You didn't care about fitting in with the popular crowd and always helped others with their assignments. Even after knowing you for just a short time, I fell in love. When you asked me to be your girlfriend, I was over the moon. But then, a month later, you introduced me to Amanda and Brian at a restaurant, and your ex-wife showed up calling me your fifth girlfriend. I panicked and ran. I ignored your attempts to contact me. My brother Jake convinced me it was all lies, and I tried to reach you, but my calls didn't go through. Henry nodded, recalling how he had blocked her number. Eve continued. I didn't have the courage to knock on your door. I was afraid you'd turn me away. Henry asked, So what gave you the courage to show up today? Before Eve could answer, Amanda jumped in. Jake, Brian, and I pushed Dad to hear you out. And Eve, why did you jump into my pool? Henry asked, using the nickname Eve tenderly, which made her heart flutter. I wanted your attention so badly, Eve admitted, her voice shaking. I was scared but overcame my fear. I'm so sorry I ran away and didn't ask for your side of the story. Can you forgive me? Henry, barely above a whisper, said, Eve, I told Amanda I still dream about you. Do you know the song Avalanche by Leonard Cohen? You became my avalanche. We both need therapy to work through this. Eve's voice wavered. Does that mean you accept me back? Henry shook his head slowly. No. Eve turned pale, but Henry quickly continued. I never told you to leave, you ran away. Should I ask if you want to come back? Eve squeaked. Yes, I was a fool to leave. Can I stay tonight? Amanda interrupted. Dad, I have something to tell you about Eve. Henry groaned. Give me a break, Cupid, daughter. Amanda explained. Brian and I decided to let Mom back into our lives on two conditions: she leaves you alone and sees a psychologist. I'll go with her. Henry nodded thoughtfully. That is wise. If it helps prevent future tensions, I promise to be well-behaved when I see her. But that doesn't mean I'll invite her over for dinner. There will be times when you or Brian might want a family gathering, and I don't want you to have to choose sides because of me. I can speak for your mother, though. Amanda sighed in relief. Oh, Daddy, you're so understanding, thank you, and kissed his cheek. Now I'll leave you to Eve. Are you coming, Brian? She grinned mischievously. Eve, still unsure, looked at Henry. Do I have to leave? Henry smiled warmly. Not on my account. I have a spare bedroom. He laughed. But whichever room you choose, you'll find me in bed. Eve blushed and smiled. They went to bed, and after a moment Henry spoke first. Will you marry me? Eve sat up abruptly, eyes wide. What did you just say? Henry repeated. Will you marry me? Eve was silent for a moment, then asked, Do you really want to marry me? You don't have to. I'm yours with or without a ring. I promise to stay by your side through everything. Henry smiled. That is enough for me. I promise the same, but for me it's about making a commitment. Consider us married now. Do you want to move in or should I? Eve laughed. I'll get my things. I don't have much after my divorce. Dear Eve, you don't have to worry he can hurt you anymore. The next morning, Henry called Amanda and Brian with the happy news. After breakfast, he and Eve went to collect her belongings. A year later, Henry watched Eve swim, having overcome her fear of water. He hummed as he walked back to his office, detouring to the mailbox. Inside, he made coffee and sorted through the mail, finding an unstamped letter addressed to him. Recognizing the handwriting, he groaned. Eve, noticing his mood, asked, Harry, look at me, please. Henry looked up, and Eve continued, Ingrid wrote that letter. We talked when we met at Brian S.'s place. Her counselor helped her realize her mistakes. and she's now trying to make amends. Please read it, it will help you understand. Henry grumbled, I don't need a relationship with her. I just want to be left alone. Eve, firm yet gentle, took his coffee, sat on his desk, and said, You need to read it, or she'll keep haunting you. Read the letter. Henry nodded slowly and opened the envelope. The letter read, Dear Henry, I still think of you as Dear Henry, even though I know you don't feel the same. Our children have told me you don't care about me anymore, and hearing that shocked me. But I need to tell you I am sorry. When you left, you said you were so angry there were no words, and now I don't have the words to describe my regret. I destroyed our marriage and tried to ruin your life. Amanda and Brian made me go to counseling, and it was brutal. The counselor said I was jealous, selfish, and entitled. I hurt you terribly. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. The children said you'll be civil to me, which you can do by ignoring me. I've dated other men and realized I threw away what we had. Please, let me into your life for the children's sake. I want to pursue you or invade your life, but when we meet, will you talk to me? Henry sighed, setting the letter down, feeling a mix of emotions. I long to hear your voice. The letter ended with remorse and love, signed Ingrid. Henry looked at Eva's expectant face and sighed deeply. I'll think about it, but don't expect an answer anytime soon. I don't like people prying into my feelings. Eve wanted to offer some words of comfort, but stopped when she saw the emotionless look on Henry's face and the coldness in his eyes. She nodded, understanding that he needed time to process everything. Henry retreated to his garage, where he worked on his 1949 BMW R24 motorcycle, attempting to distract himself by disassembling the carburetor. However, he found it hard to concentrate, his thoughts muddled with frustration. By dinner time, Henry still hadn't spoken, and Eve began to worry. Beloved, she asked gently, how can I help? Do you want to talk about it? Henry replied gruffly, I wish I could cancel that letter. I regret reading it. It makes me feel manipulated by the kids. Eve was taken aback by his harsh tone. That's not true. No one is forcing you, she said soothingly. Henry stood up, pacing back and forth. Really? You discussed this letter with Amanda, Brian, and my ex-wife, and you all encouraged me to read it. How is that not persuasion? I promised to think it over, but right now I feel like an idiot. Maybe I should go away to clear my head. Eve turned pale at his words. She had anticipated a reaction, but not such intense anger. Harry, she began cautiously, maybe a break would help. Just be careful. Henry sighed. Tomorrow I am taking the RV to Limburg. I'll book a camping spot and try to sort things out. The next morning, Henry packed up and drove south, grumbling to himself. Just when I think I'm free of her, Ingrid pulls another trick. He shook his head, annoyed, and the only available campsite is where this all started. Meanwhile, back in Formont, Eve tried reaching Amanda, but couldn't get through. She finally contacted Brian. Hi, Eve. Is everything okay? You usually call Amanda. Brian, Harry read Ingrid's letter yesterday and it didn't go well. He felt pressured and left this morning for Limburg with the RV. I am worried and don't know what to do. Brian sighed heavily. Oh, damn, this is unexpected. I'll head over after I contact Amanda and inform Mom. For now, let's just hope Dad calms down. Stay strong, Eve. He'll come back. Despite Brian's reassurances, Eve couldn't shake her anxiety. That afternoon, Henry arrived at the campground and set up his RV. While exploring, he spotted a familiar face, the real estate agent who had infected Ingrid with syphilis. Rage flared in Henry's chest, but he kept his distance, observing as the man wandered off, unaware of Henry's presence. The next morning, Henry approached the campground manager. Do you know anything about those people over there? Henry asked, gesturing toward the agent's campsite. The manager nodded, frowning. They are bad news, but without proof, there's not much I can do. I have a CCTV camera on their site, though. If they slip up, we'll catch it. Henry, formulating a plan, smiled knowingly. So, if I provoke them, you didn't see anything? The manager chuckled. Like Manuel from Faulty Towers, I know nothing, he replied, mimicking a Spanish accent. I am from Barcelona, after all. Henry laughed, appreciating the reference. "We understand each other," he said, leaving the office. He approached the Agent S site, greeting the men warmly. "Good morning, gentlemen." The agent, looking haggard and suspicious, squinted at Henry. "Do I know you?" he asked. Henry, keeping his cool, replied, "No, just offering coffee since we're neighbors, and you seem to need it after a fun night." The man introduced himself as Abe. "Call me Abe," he said gruffly, "and bring something strong. It's been a rough night." "Sure," Henry agreed. "What time?" "3," Abe replied. "And bring your strongest stuff." Henry left and returned with brandy, whiskey, and Dutch Genever, the latter diluted heavily with water. At 3:00, he joined Abe, his friend, and a young woman named Bridget. As they drank, Henry discreetly recorded the conversation on his phone. Abe, loosening up after a few drinks, bragged about their exploits. "Bridget here is just 19, he said with a sly grin. "But who cares? You'd be surprised how easy it is to get a girl to go along with things. We even had one who told her husband to buzz off because she was having too much fun with us." Henry felt his stomach churn but pressed on. "What if the woman doesn't want to?" he asked, feigning innocence. Abe smirked. "That is easy to handle, but I prefer when they are willing." He then slipped something into Bridget S' drink, moving from wine to cocktails. As Bridget became visibly drunk and resistant, Abe and his friend grew more aggressive. Abe finally declared, "Time to use Daddy S' little helpers," referring to sedatives. Henry, ensuring the CCTV camera was capturing everything, stood up. "I don't like where this is going. I am out." "What are you going to do about it?" Abe grinned maliciously. Henry, aiming to escalate the situation, muttered, "Which one of you needs syphilis treatment?" Abe's friend turned purple with anger. "How do you know about that?" he shouted. Henry, keeping his cool, replied, "My ex-wife treated you, idiot. Now that I see how you act, I am stopping it." Enraged, Abe lunged at Henry with a knife. Henry staggered back, falling into a chair as chaos erupted. Meanwhile, in Formont, Eve was on the phone with Brian. "Dad S. in the hospital," Brian informed her, his voice tight with concern. "What happened?" Eve asked, her heart racing. "He was stabbed by Abe, the real estate agent," Brian explained. "Apparently, Dad was recording them doing something shady. He is stable, but it was close. We're on our way to the hospital now." Eve felt a rush of fear and relief. "I'll be there as soon as I can," she said, already grabbing her keys. "Thank you for letting me know." As Eve drove to the hospital, her mind raced with thoughts of Henry and their future together, hoping they could overcome this new challenge. He was stabbed, and the police want to arrest him for assault. Eve's voice trembled. "What? Is he okay?" Brian responded, "He needs surgery. The hospital called me. Amanda and I will pick you up so we can see him." "Okay, I'll pack a bag," Eve replied, her voice shaking with worry. The car ride was tense, with Brian driving fast but carefully. Eve sobbed softly in the back seat. "I wish we hadn't given him that letter," she said, guilt weighing heavy on her. Amanda spoke quietly, trying to stay composed. "Dad is not the type to fight unless absolutely necessary. He must have been defending himself. I almost feel sorry for the other guy." 2 hours later, they arrived at the hospital and were met by Officer Jansen. "Good evening, I am Officer Jansen. Who are you?" After introductions, Jansen explained, "Mr. Vander is no longer a suspect. CCTV footage and phone records clearly show it was self-defense. He saved a woman from being assaulted. 2 men attacked him, but he is quite skilled. They'll regret messing with him." Eve, anxious, interrupted, "How is he? Is he going to be okay?" Jansen shook his head. "I am not sure. You should speak with the doctors." After several inquiries, they found the right room. A nurse informed them that Henry was in surgery. His condition was serious, but he was expected to pull through despite significant blood loss. They were given the option to wait in the hospital or rent a room across the street. The trio decided to stay close by, crossing the street to a guest room where they anxiously waited. As Henry lay unconscious, he began to regain awareness. He heard a steady beeping and thought, "What is that noise? I have a headache." He wanted to speak, but his mouth felt sealed shut. A deep, comforting voice spoke. "Ah, there he is. Mr. Vander, if you can hear me, raise your right hand." Henry, groggy, raised his hand slightly. "Good," said the doctor. "I am Dr. de Ritter. I am here to help you recover. You just narrowly avoided a fatal injury, so stay calm. I'll remove some of the tubes and wet your mouth, then you can see some very worried people. After Dr. Derrida removed the tube, he opened the door to let Eve, Amanda, and Brian in. As he left, he muttered, "Lucky fool," under his breath, leaving the family to reunite. Eve, tears streaming down her face, whispered, "What happened? I shouldn't have given you that letter." Henry smiled weakly and whispered back, "No, it is okay, it cost me, but now I have a clear answer to Ingrid's letter." He sighed, closing his eyes, "I am so tired," and drifted back to sleep. After a brief visit, Eve and the children met with Dr. Derrida. "The knife nicked a major vein," he explained, "but we managed to stabilize him in time. We've stitched him up, and while he'll be sore and numb for a while, he should make a full recovery. However, he'll need to refrain from any strenuous activity, including martial arts, for at least 3 months." Brian, surprised, asked, "How did you know my father practices Krav Maga?" Dr. Derrida smiled knowingly. "It explains a lot, doesn't it? Officially, I am not at liberty to say, but let's just say you should see the other guys. One will need a cane for life, and the other is currently eating through a straw." A week later, Henry sat in an armchair at home, holding Ingrid's letter. He spoke sadly. "When I first read the letter and went camping, I considered letting Ingrid back into my life. But then I found out the men at the campground were the same ones Ingrid had been involved with almost 4 years ago. They trusted me, not knowing who I was, and revealed she gave them the venereal disease, not the other way around. She got drunk after their fun, not before. She cheated on me long before I ended things with her. She's absolutely not coming back into my life. However, I will treat her like a stranger. I don't want our children to choose between parents because of my decisions. It's my responsibility to tell her that, so please don't interfere." 2 weeks later, Dr. Derrida cleared Henry to start exercising again under the supervision of a physical therapist. 6 weeks after the altercation, he still struggled with how to approach his ex-wife, so he decided to improvise. A week later, Henry waited at the same restaurant where Ingrid had tried to ruin his relationship with Eve. He and Eve were now deeply in love, having worked through their insecurities with the help of counseling. As he sat, he saw Ingrid enter with a guest. Standing, he waved them over. "Ingrid, you brought company for a private conversation?" Ingrid, looking nervous, responded, "Harry, this is my counselor. She's here for support." Harry raised an eyebrow. "Ah, still trying to manipulate me, Ingrid? Perhaps I should have brought my own counselor after what you had put me through." Ingrid, taken aback, replied, "I thought we could talk things through. My counselor is just here to help." Harry sighed. "I promised you dinner, so let us eat first, then we'll talk." Ingrid noticed that Harry barely ate and rarely drank wine, yet he seemed relaxed. After dessert, Harry asked, "So Ingrid, what do you want from me?" Ingrid, almost choking on her ice cream, was interrupted by her counselor. "Sir, you are being quite rude. Ingrid is trying to resolve the issues between you two." "This hostility isn't helping." Henriette's expression hardened. "You have no idea the pain she has caused me. Ingrid, do you know why I was in the hospital?" Ingrid, thrown off by his cold demeanor, stammered, "In the hospital?" "Yes, but I don't know why. The kids haven't told me anything." Henry leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Do you want to know why?" Both women nodded. Henry continued, "After I read your letter, I needed to do some serious soul-searching. My loved ones asked me to consider what you wrote, so I went camping, coincidentally at the same place where your affair began. There I met the men you were involved with. I gained their trust and recorded them bragging about their conquests. When I objected, they started a fight and one pulled a knife." He paused, taking a sip of his drink before continuing. "I have part of this recording on my phone." The counselor interjected, "I don't think that's necessary." Henry cut her off. "It is necessary. You're not my counselor, and the reason for my decision must be clear." He played the recording, and Ingrid's face paled as her lies were exposed. Tears streamed down her cheeks. When the recording ended, Henry looked at her, emotionless. "These men only recognized me after the recording was done. I encouraged them to attack me, but they freely gave up the information. So, ex-wife, I conclude that you cheated on me with at least one man months before this event. You humiliated and insulted me for 6 months, breaking our vows. Your grand finale at the camp solidified my decision." There was a heavy silence. Henry's expression remained grim. To paraphrase, I am in good company now, so kindly back off. With that, Henry stood, paid the bill, and left the restaurant, heading back to Eve, the woman he truly loved.